everybody, welcome back to the Bible Show. Today I'm going to be doing an interesting critique and analysis on pop culture with the cognitive origins in mind. Today I'm going to be discussing why I believe um, why I believe the 90s is peak human culture. So the 90s, just for a preface for anyone who doesn't know too much about that era, really, really cool time that people often reminisce and have nostalgia about. This was the time of Michael Jordan, the Dream Team, SNES, a bunch of other cool stuff, Sega, um, a lot of amazing films that year, in that decade. And just overall, it was a time when technology was at a point where it really benefited people's lives. It was like a great supplicant to people's lives. It wasn't like technology was sort of consuming and actually using us, which we'll sort of get into later. It was sort of that perfect blend when technology was just there enough, but there was still a lot of human creativity that was there, which is pretty cool and amazing. And I think, I myself have a sentiment that I wish I was in the 90s, or I wish we could go back to that peak, sort of that zenith of human culture. And I truly, if we analyze it from cognitive origins, uh, satisfaction. I got ahead of myself. Reverence and why it was sort of the peak of human culture. And we've, even though technology has advanced, we sort of degraded. We really have degraded in human culture, and we can see that through the reflection, the kind of origins, how we actually. It's really interesting how we actually lost a lot of our cognitive origins, even with so much technology there is, even with how much there is, how much power we have, quote unquote, on paper, we actually lose a lot of cognitive origins. So I'm not too sure how I want to format this besides going through the cognitive origins. I'm not sure if I want to do 90s and today, but I'll be. We'll see what happens. But I guess we'll start with discovery first. So just to recap, discovery cognitive origin is sort of like exploration, being on the cutting edge, um, really just it's really a self-explanatory cognitive origin. It's discovering something brand new. It's a desire. It's sort of an archetype that all humans seek after to some degree. Uh, some people with different personalities or slants of their soul chase it more so. And taking a look at today, sort of what we have in the culture is sort of in 2026 a lack of discovery. And the reason for that is because the algorithms is sort of creating, I think everyone already knows this, sort of bubbles for us. And we keep consuming the same content over and over and over again with slight variations. And I believe this really started with the new millennium. And actually, I wouldn't blame it on the new millennium. I would say it's really started um, really, especially in 2020. It's, I think, with people staying homes and people, it's now a habitual instinct for us to really just consume and be stuck in the algorithm and really immerse ourselves into the YouTube and online and internet space to really it's a very natural part of our culture. And I want to like maybe maybe it did start in the 2000s. Maybe maybe the 90s really was that great that it did start just as soon as the 90s ended. And a reason that I have that I say that is because they made Halloween H2O in the year 2002, and that's not maybe not the best reason to include there, but that's the start of, I wouldn't say that's the start of remake culture, but just since the 2000s there's been so many remakes of, for example, just one small example I mentioned, like the Halloween series, just a lot of remakes, just people digesting the same, and we take it back to the present time, 2026, we really see the reflection of just overconsumption of the same exact thing over and over with slight variations in sort of the art that we produce, the films that we produce, a lot of the same things, a lot of remakes and films. Dune Part 2, Dune Part 3, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, Halloween remakes with the Rob Zombie Halloween films, Halloween 2009, Halloween 2, and it's gotten worse and worse. There was a Scream 7, um, really just remaking many great films. Jumanji, what uh, what other remakes? There's just so many remakes out there of great films. No really new original ideas, and jump back to the past again. A lot of juggling back and forth here. The 80s we had like a lot of crazy stuff like Gremlins. I'm I'm not the greatest expert on 80s pop culture, but Nightmare on Elm Street, which was sort of it connects a little back. It connects a little bit to me as like the story was like the story originated from sort of like some Cambodian people that were trying to escape or going to get out of Cambodia, going to pilgrimage elsewhere. I'm guessing this was after the civil war in Cambodia, and they sort of mysteriously died due to nightmares, and sort of that was the inspiration behind Nightmare on Elm Street, and just all the creativity and original ideas back then. It was a lot of weird stuff, but like what most people, and even people back then would probably consider like a lot of weird stuff, but all the ideas were really original and creative. So if we were to see something like that, like back in theaters nowadays, like maybe like space eating zombies from outer space, that I actually got that idea from not really being on my phone much today. So I think that really just goes to show how much what sort of the culture, what sort of the 90s culture created, just sort of a lack of technology, a lack of overconsumption of the same thing, a lack of the algorithm pushing the same thing so that you pushing things that you like so that you stay on there, so there's more ad clicks, so they can get more information from you, so that they can surveil you more. It's just sort of the opposite of that in the 90s, and still sort of that human creativity and imagination intact. We got so much great pop culture in there, and that's something that we're lacking in today. Very much surprisingly, even though sort of have the world at our fingertips, quote unquote, we sort of lack discoveries, a lack of creativity and imagination. Like just so many remakes of old films, of like films in the 90s and the 2000s that are happening in theaters nowadays. Nothing really new or creative. There's not a lot of great films nowadays, which is quite a shame. And just with the phone culture that's sort of around everywhere today, let's go say like a couple of people sort of stop playing their phones and maybe they get some, or just stop diving into opting into that technological world. I would say I'm not sure if it's enough to counteract everyone else being on their phones, but I think as individuals we can really start and create counterculture movements and really push ourselves to escape the sort of enslavement that we're being put into, enslavement by the algorithms. and we really use our creativity and imagination to produce great works for the rest of humanity to discover. And that's really going to satisfy the discovery kind of origin. And it's really going to push our culture back to some old heights that we reached before and have sort of declined recently just due to the lack of creativity, which is a shame. But we can easily, I think there's a, I think maybe in the 2030s we're going to see a counterculture. We're slowly building up now, just people going back to older traditional forms of media. And I think 2030 is going to be really the start of a new counterculture. I think the culture is going to be a lot better than before, so that is great. And then we have the origin of satisfaction. Satisfaction is sort of happiness, the pursuit of happiness, happiness and the pursuit of happiness, freedom, um, being satisfied. It's also another one of those self-explanatory cognitive origins. And with satisfaction, one of the big problems in the culture nowadays, in our culture nowadays, is that we've sort of become a very uptight, I would say, satanic culture. In the 90s, we sort of had a perfect blend. I was born in a generation, but I think I can confidently make the statement. In the 90s, we had like a perfect blend of just enough freedom, but still a heavy presence of church and morality. But now in 2026, have we're sort of at a point where the church has lost a lot of its power and influence over many areas of the world, and a lot of the world is under satanic influence. And even though there is satanic influence, I would still say it's the minority, but it's a very powerful minority. It's a powerful enough minority that everyone else is sort of feeling the effects. And how that plays into satisfaction is that as human beings, especially with the satisfaction origin, we sort of we feel happiest around people that are most like us. And everyone, for the most part, has a soul. I mean, has a sort of some sort of righteousness inside of them, some sort of goodness inside of them that makes them want to see good, makes them want to see beautiful things in life, and how this culture is constantly pushing negative things onto us, sort of really demonic things, just nudity, profanity, sexual content to the umpteenth degree, really pushing it, all the drag shows and everything, just pushing it way, way too hard, like making it, sort of creating it into a lifestyle nowadays, really normalizing it. That's taken away a lot of satisfaction from the world because not everyone, I would say most people don't resonate with that satanic culture. There's some parts of that darkness or that freedom that people find alluring, most definitely, just like in the 90s. There's definitely some things that, some freedoms and desires of flesh that people find very seductive, but it's just so oversaturated nowadays by the very powerful satanic minority, and that's taking away satisfaction from just a lot of people. And coupled with just, we'll get more into that later, just the technocratic society that we live in, everything just that's taken away from like a lot of our freedoms if we understand that we're being watched and basically observed at all points. CIA, Pentagon, law enforcement. It just takes away so much satisfaction from the world. Also, coupled to the fact with sort of satisfaction of the flesh, less relationships that are happening, less people that are going out, going on dates together, starting families. Um, that's definitely playing a big part in human satisfaction, just sort of the drop in human satisfaction. But I would say the greatest damage to human satisfaction is sort of just the current culture, which is Satanism, a very satanic culture, and who's being satisfied by who's really being satisfied by this culture. Maybe like very maybe some very evil and wicked people that really, maybe some very evil, wicked people, but I would say most people on Earth aren't really satisfied by the new culture. Just so Satanism, it's just it's hard to be happy with that. Really hard to be happy with a Satanistic culture. And then justification. So we currently have in 2026, and sort of even before that, really starting like 2010s and really like 2015, 2016 with like Twitter culture, 2013. Um, we have cancel culture. So back in the 90s, um, there was a lot more justification out there for men. There were guys out there like I'm a huge fan. I would say I'm a huge fan of Brett Ratner's films, like the Rush Hour films. But what I'm trying to say is that there was justification for men out there. Guys could be guys. Guys could be. I don't condone this behavior, but guys could be really making moves on women, really being really testosterone films, and the justification for that was guys got to be guys. This is guy culture. This is just how guys roll. This is just sort of a guy thing. It was very much justified by society, and now we're sort of losing that justification by society, and we sort of shifted to a cancel culture. So there's a lack of justification nowadays, a lack of forgiveness for guys, and there's really no justification for guys to really be masculine, to really, use their testosterone to the full potential. And even with like the justification types out there, the ENFPs and ISTJs, even with their sort of mastery over justification, I would say it's very hard for them to push back against this current culture. This is sort of part of the satanic culture that we live in, just being very unforgiving and wicked and evil, and not allowing guys to be guys, giving no justification to guys, whereas instead giving justification to the most evil and heinous people in this world. And their justification is that they can just do whatever they want because they have the power. And that sort of when I just said that, to me that's not the most, I didn't find it to be the most satisfying explanation, but I guess the point, at least for justification, is that for men, it's no longer there for it's no longer a backdrop or sort of backbone or something for men to lean on, and we sort of lost it. And instead, justification has been given to to the worst of us in society. It's sort of a normal thing to be that evil and heinous nowadays. It's there was like some sort of article like a couple years back about pedophilia being part of being okay to be added to the LGBTQ name or symbol, and just sort of evil being so normal. I guess that's the justification. I'm pretty sure that's the justification for bad people, the worst of society. Evil being so normal, that's their justification because everyone else is doing it. It's okay for me to be doing X, Y, and Z, and so we've stopped justifying the most powerful group on the world, which is men, and we started justifying the worst of us in this world, which is a good amount of the men, but just sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of character. And then we have validation. Validation is the cognitive origin of sort of social roles, what's right and what's wrong for people to do. And it's something that we have sort of lost with sort of the LGBTQ and feminist culture pushing boss babes and pushing female police and pushing females in roles that are unnatural to them and sort of roles where they're not most talented at. And in the 90s, we sort of like the 80s and 70s, there was still a strong sense of validation where guys did what guys did and girls did what girls did. And there was just enough freedom, just enough satisfaction, I would say, that women could still pursue being a top corporate executive or something at um, like a big corporate company in New York. And there was just enough of that freedom where it was still okay and not really an infectious part of our culture. So that's something that has sort of eroded away. Validation, it's still there, it's still lingering there, but just our culture is trying to break down order, break down validation. So we sort of lost validation, validation lost over the years. And then we have achievements. I would say with achievements, um, with our culture nowadays, with just how much inflation is, sort of that dream of having a house, a nice car, a family, it's sort of getting further and further away for the new generation. Um, and back in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, I think with the housing market, it wasn't the worst. I don't think it was the worst compared to today. I think there was a lot less inflation. Houses back then were I was looking at the average price. It was like 151,000, and minimum wage or the wage around that time was like $4, $5, $7, $6, and everything was a lot more affordable back then. The dollar, of course, was a lot less inflated, so it was a lot easier to achieve the traditional milestones that we really hail and honor in society, like getting married, having kids, getting a house, getting a good job, pushing your kids through education, and really having a nice retirement when you grow older. And nowadays, we sort of lost that sort of achievement and milestone with social security pension not being so being in a really insecure spot, um, which is really contrary to the social security part of the name, unfortunately. And we also have, of course, inflation making everything very expensive. Job market is I don't want to make this sound as an excuse, but job market is just really favoring the very talented and very skilled. It's very hard for people that are just average or just it's very hard for people that are not the most desirable in sort of the job market, like not the best of the best to really compete in jobs. It's getting harder for them there. So it's getting harder for people to achieve things nowadays. And that's something that was a lot easier in the 90s. So harder to achieve, harder to achieve. And with reverence, so when I was thinking of reverence in order to try to prepare for this video, in this culture, I think in 2026, our current modern day culture, it's very easy for really anyone to be cool and to like sort of fit in. I think if you have an iPhone and a decent car and a decent job, I think people think you're cool. Um, Back in the 90s, I think what made it just a lot more charming. Um, it was a lot harder to be cool back then. I think that's sort of the current opinion that I'm leaning on. Um, I think in the 90s you had to be like really good looking, really had a really cool corporate job. You had to drive a nice car like a BMW, a Beamer, or Mercedes. You had to really have an awesome girlfriend, a really pretty girlfriend. You had to have like really cool apartment or a great house in the works. And it was a lot harder to be cool back then. But people were really truly cool in the 90s, and now there's sort of an overinflation of cool people, where it sort of lost its meaning. Just the the floor is really low to be cool nowadays. And with the floor being so low, we don't often get to see the best of society, and people aren't often pushed to the best of society, or pushed really want to aspire themselves to chase those heights, because nowadays, like, if people see you with an iPhone, maybe people don't see you ever again. They might get the impression that you're some rich, cool guy when maybe you're not really that rich or that cool. And just sort of reverence, just the barrier to entry is so low. And it's really hard to be cool nowadays. And I think this can be really reflected with our celebrity culture. Um, Celebrity culture in the 90s was really hot and popping. If you were a celebrity back then, you were sort of very much respected and revered. But if you're a celebrity in 2026, you're really not much so respected and revered, because of sort of the economics of attention, like how easy it is to get attention with current technology, and how some very powerful people can push you to the very top um, of that attention scale, even though maybe you're not that cool. So just overinflation of coolness, and we lost a lot of the old charm of coolness, like we lost old school cool, and I think we need to bring back old school cool, because like with the hairstyles and everything, we're a lot more laid back with hairstyles. We're a lot more just laid back in our culture, so we really lost that aspect of reverence in the 90s, and that's sort of I would say a reason for that is just sort of just technology, um, really technology just breaking that barrier of entry to being cool. So now you have an iPhone, you don't have to have a cool hairstyle. Back in the days, um, back in the day, I think sort of have some family members that can probably attest to this. If you had a boombox in the 90s, you were like, or some sort of piece of technology like a TV that most people take as commonplace nowadays, you were super, super cool. So just a harder barrier to entry nowadays. Back then, really, just really gave reverence a new, like a really special meaning. It, like you were really, if someone said you were cool, you really were cool. And now we have the connection cognitive origin, which probably the one of the worst cognitive origins that's been hit. Um, Nowadays, everyone is inside, is on their phone, so it's really hard to build a connection with anyone. Um, just with their whole culture of just xenophobia, lack of trust, uh, and how this sort of played out with just maybe it's just the bad housing market, just bad inflation causing people to be desperate. It's a bad culture, the lack of cognitive origins in general, causing people to maybe lash out, and it destroys trust, and it sort of plays out in a snowball kind of effect. And now we have ring doorbells everywhere, which is really it's very demeaning when you walk up and you see a ring doorbell, and it really just takes away from the connection of people overall. So connection, I think, it's a pretty easy one to spot. I think everyone can say that, can see how we lost connection. And back in the 90s, I think it was so much easier to have connection. Um, Not enough technology to keep people that invested, and but just the perfect amount of technology where you could really still make really use it to make meaningful contact with someone that's far away. So just loss of connection, which is sad. Loss of connection. Like going to the bar, you could actually build a strong, meaningful connection there. And I still think if you have um, not, the word is not capacity, but if you have the sort of inclination or disposition to really meet someone at the bar. If you have the desire, I think eventually it's going to happen. But it's a lot less easier to facilitate, which is a shame. And then we have authority, which is very much being destroyed. Like in 2026, men and women have lost so much power because we live in a technocratic society. We're ruled by basically technology, and it's sort of our society has sort of become eerily similar to the novel 1984 by George Orwell. Just surveillance everywhere, Big Brother watching you. I was thinking to myself in my head, just imagining a situation. If even if all the law enforcement of America was gone, there'd still be data centers and people surveilling you. There'll still be that big, just that big, just a big mass of darkness that it's so impossible to defeat, so impossible to get over. It's almost a godlike being in a sense that it has the all-seeing eye, surveillance, extremely powerful. Extremely. How do you destroy every computer, every camera, every iPhone in the world, every sort of piece of technology that has some sort of surveillance aspect? So it's I don't think there's I think there is counterplay to living in a technocratic society, being ruled by technology. I think that's the really first understand that you live in a technocratic society, and after that, it's really leveraging all your options to combat a technocratic society, like opting out of certain technology that's not going to take away from, it's not drastically going to change your lifestyle. And just back to the 90s, where technology was a lot less powerful and there was a lot less surveillance, especially with the Patriot Act not being passed. Humans had so much power. Like, if there was a serial killer, like a slasher film that came out in the 90s, it'd be pretty believable that all those events could happen. But if a slasher film were to come out nowadays, I don't think people would really buy into. I myself wouldn't buy into it because of how easy it is to really track and surveil people. That I think most people would assume that as soon as someone would go out to buy a costume, maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, that person would be placed on high alert. Or if someone were to buy a knife and a rope or something like that, that person would be placed on high alert immediately. So just to fight technology, it's very hard to fight technology. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. To destroy every iPhone out there. It sounds so silly and foolish. Um, but that's the sort of society that we have become, and we sort of lost the power from sort of our glory days of the 90s, the 80s, the 70s. Just the amount of authority and power that men and women had, the freedoms that we have in terms of authority has been completely lost in this technocratic society that we live in. To be ruled by technology, it's not that fun, and the best we can do to combat this, as one of the options that we can leverage against technology, is to opt out of certain technology, understand what we're getting ourselves into, and opting out enough where it's not drastically changing our lives. But I guess what we saw from going through all these cognitive origins, everything, all these cognitive origins have been damaged um, to a massive extent. And comparing it to the 90s, I would say all these cognitive origins were at their peak, I think, from my current opinion, in the 90s. So somehow, hopefully in the 2030s, with this sort of understanding out there, we can really push back and drag culture, like, pretty please, pretty please. I hope everyone gets on board, pretty please, to drag culture back to the 90s, to give everyone back their cognitive origins, not just on a cultural scale. Like we need a mass. I really hope that we do have a massive cultural shift back to where everyone gets their cognitive origins back, not just a select few people that have sort of. Oh, okay, in a bit, yeah, in a bit. Not just sort of a select group of people that has sort of built an ecosystem to really satisfy their cognitive origins, or in a very fortunate position to satisfy the cognitive origins. To have everyone in society be eating well, metaphorically, and just having all their cognitive origins satisfied, that would be a pipe dream. And I think if we work together, we can bring back discovery. Most definitely, authority is going to be. We can turn off. We can fight back. We can fight back against technology. We can get our satisfaction back. We can fight the Satanists. We can give justification of men, allow men to be men. And when we allow men to be men, we bring back satisfaction. As men are going to pursue women more. That's just one aspect. Bring validation back. Make it cheap and easier. Make reverence harder. Bring back connection. It's just we gotta stop. We gotta choose to stop diving into technology for a bit every day. Make more time for connection. And again, we just gotta fight technology. Technology. Fight the technology, which has sort of become a godlike figure, which is the all-seeing eye, the all-present eye, just has become extremely, extremely powerful. So that's my sort of analysis of why I believe the 90s is peak culture and sort of what's happening nowadays, why the 90s really satisfied all these cognitive origins, and why our cognitive origins are not being satisfied in the current modern day and age.